Hey guys, so this is a video that I wanted to do for a while now because I get a lot of comments and a lot of questions about certain specs in certain phones. I think we've reached a point where people are so obsessed with the numbers on paper that the experience and the actual usage almost takes a back seat. I really don't think it should be this way. Because what's the point of just having so many good specs if it really doesn't translate to a benefit for you as a user? And the thing is, it's really not as simple as bigger number equals better. So, as an example, you have some phones with crazy high megapixel counts and other phones that have slightly lower or much lower megapixel counts but with bigger sensors. And a lot of people are just so obsessed with the numbers that they assume automatically that more megapixels equal better camera, which isn't always true. The other very recent example is in a device like the Nokia 5.3, and then you have the newer Nokia 5.4, for example. So the 5.3 comes with a Snapdragon 665 processor, while the newer 5.4 comes with a Snapdragon 662 processor. If you were to just look at the number, you'd assume that last year's model is better than this year's model. But that's actually not true at all. So even in benchmarks, the newer processor does perform better. And both of them are based on the same architecture, but the newer processor is a bit more power efficient and does perform better when it comes to actual usage. It's not all roses and butterflies for the newer processor, but a lot of people automatically assume because 665 is more than 662, then the old processor is better or maybe more advanced. The other aspect that completely gets lost if you're just so obsessed over the specs and the numbers is the actual build quality of the product. If you want to make a device that feels really nice in the hand and is built of better quality materials and feels more solid, that's going to cost you more than a similar device with a cheaper build quality that can easily bend and isn't as well built. Next time you look at two phones and they cost almost identical, and one of them has slightly lower specs than the other, that does also mean that there's a reason for this. Maybe the phone costs a bit more to build, for example. Maybe the materials are slightly better. So this is why it's definitely a good thing to go and check out the phone, try and get your hands on it, hold it, use it, and then make a judgment on whether you prefer phone X over phone Y. Don't just go over the numbers and then pick and choose, unless there is a specific spec that you definitely need and can't live without. The other aspect that you don't see or don't understand when you're just looking at the numbers is that there's something called after-sales support. And this includes service centers, their quality, as well as software updates. So this is something that you don't pay for outright, but it definitely makes your experience better over the long term. So for example, a phone that gets released and only receives one update within the first 6 months and then gets forgotten is cheaper for the company than the phone that's released, maybe with slightly lower components, that gets released with updates for let's say 2 years and continues getting support. The second phone that gets more updates over a long period of time will cost more than the first phone. It has to cost more than the first phone because it does get support after it's being released, and that does cost money. Sadly, I've seen this trend where a lot of phones get released and then almost never fixed, and you end up with software issues that were there on day one that actually never get fixed or get fixed very, very late. There are other things that go into play as well. So for example, you have a 1080p display and a 720p display. A lot of people will be like, oh no, I can't live with a 720p display. But what if the 1080p display is actually terrible to use? It has very poor brightness, terrible viewing angles, it looks washed out, you just don't want to use it even if it has a higher, better number on paper. The same also goes for battery capacity. So you sometimes find phones with crazy large batteries that are so poorly optimized that they end up with worse battery life than phones with 10 to 20% less battery capacity. So never underestimate how important optimization is for the software experience and whether something is better to use than the other. The same also goes for some phones that advertise higher refresh rate displays, and then you end up using them and the software is so choppy and barely runs more than 30 frames per second, and it just feels like a really bad experience, but they manage to grab your attention because they're offering you 120 Hz or 90 Hz, but the actual usage doesn't really reflect that. So the benefit that you get from the hardware being there is almost completely diminished because the software isn't running the same way it should. Look, this is not a video defending Nokia Mobile. I want you to completely forget that, I mainly talk about Nokia devices. What I'm trying to say here is that there is more to how a phone is and how long a phone will live and what happens after you buy a phone than just looking at numbers on an Excel sheet. What I would recommend doing is research before you buy. Look for long-term reviews of products and don't just be attracted to flashy headlines where the specs are the most important aspect and then you end up buying the phone and you feel disappointed 6 months down the line. Anyways, that's everything I wanted to say. I hope my point came across quite clear. That's it for me. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please don't forget to share, like, and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.